Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Next Door Net Admin. I've been dealing with this all week, so I'm going to tell you about it. This being dynamic update. I've always kind of skimmed over dynamic update because, if I'm honest, it's really intimidating, even for me. If we scroll down in this, and there's already a lot of text that I'm going through, and then you get to a chart that looks like this with all of these numbers in different categories, and you're like, there's 28 of these steps that I have to figure out, and you just kind of nope right out of there and say, yeah, I'm not going to do that. So, something that I have done in the past is talk about how I like to customize a Windows installation, and it has always started with a fresh download of the ISO from Microsoft, and then I'll take out a bunch of the stuff that I don't want, but then I'll install it in a virtual machine, customize it, and then capture it to an installation image of my own, a custom installation image. Part of the installation process and then customizing it includes downloading all Windows updates. So I've gone, I don't need to worry about this dynamic update thing because, I'm just going to download updates and be done with it. And then Microsoft updated the secure version number in their boot manager twice in the last few months. And I've talked about the secure version number before as well, and the scary looking error message that it can give you. But I ran into this because my installation media was still on secure version number 7. And then I'd updated a machine to secure version 9, and my install media wouldn't work anymore. And I went, uh-oh, well, that's not going to work so well. So how do I get this into my media? And I tried updating just the boot manager. Complete failure. Blue screen, and okay, well, obviously there's more that's being updated that I need to actually pay attention to. And I ended up coming back to dynamic update because I realized I need to update all the parts of this, not just the installation media. I need to update my Windows PE bootloader. Yes, obviously. But then the installation image that it deploys will also only have secure version number 7. Do I really want to re-customize the entire installation media just to get a secure version number update for the boot manager? Oh, and then another one a month later? No, not really. If there's an easier way to do it, I'd rather not have to recapture the entire golden master again from scratch. But then you think about, okay, but what about the recovery environment? That also comes with the installation media. That has to be updated separately. And so I started to actually dig into dynamic update and go, okay, there's a valid reason for wanting to do this. I've never had a need to do this, but if I'm going to continue doing this, on a semi-professional basis, a professional basis, I would say, um, I'm going to have to figure out how to deal with dynamic updates. So that's what this video is all about. I've been working on this all freaking week, and you get to catch up with me on the tail end of it. So there we go. And I'll start by noting that this does not take into account the fact that you might be running different components of these items. Your Windows recovery environment and your operating system will probably be the same version, yes. Your Windows PE might not be. Traditionally speaking, if you've got an installation ISO from Microsoft, yes, Windows PE is going to be essentially the Windows 11 version of that to install a Windows 11 operating system. It'll be the Windows Server 2025 version of that to install the Server 2025 installation. But that's not always the case. My PXE server is running Windows PE from Server 2025 because that's what my ADK is based on. But once you've booted a Server 2025 Windows PE, it's going to drop an installation target of Windows 11. And so I actually have to keep the updates for these separated. And Microsoft does not always make that easy for you. If you look at the let's see if I can pull up an example for you. Hang on a second here. Okay, here's an example of a command that I ran earlier in the week when I was looking at a boot.wim. And if you do just get image info boot.wim, it gives you the information on what indexes you have available and the brief name and description and everything else that you need. But if you add information for a specific index, you get a lot more information. Nowhere here does it tell you what version of Windows it is. What it does tell you is version 10.0.26100 and service pack build 6584. Okay, well, but what is that? You might look at it and go, well, version 10, so this is based on Windows 10. It's not. Windows 11 is also version 10.0. And if you look at it, 10.0.26100 is Windows 11 24H2. And Windows 11 25H2 is 26200. Great. And if you look at the actual KB for this, you can see that the July 14th KB 510/1650 is valid for both 26100.8875 and 26200.8875. This cumulative update applies to both Windows 11 24H2 and 25H2. But something interesting comes up when you look at the Server 2025, which, great, okay, different KB number, 509, 9536, excuse me. Fine, but this is OS build 26100.33158. This 26100 is the same as the 26100 here. On a code level, Windows 11 24H2 and Windows Server 2025 are essentially the same code. But even in the exact same day, July 14th, 2026, Server 2025 is being updated to build 33,158, and Windows 11 24H2 is being updated to 8,875. They're different builds. They now have different code, even though this version is still 10.0.26100. And that tripped me up because I went, oh, 10.0.26100, and then it's just the patch level. Great, fine. I can just get this KB and I can apply it to all of my media. And that seemed to work. And yet I went back later and I realized I've actually started my Windows PE from a base of 2025, Server 2025. And if I'm doing an entire installation ISO for Windows 11, where everything is Windows 11, great, this is what I need. But if I've got a mixed environment where part of it is from 2025 and part of it is from Windows 11, I'm going to have to get both of these updates and I'm going to have to apply them separately. So there's a little wrinkle for you if you're doing something crazy like me and you've actually got mismatched components that are working together. You're going to have to update them and keep track of them, not by the version number, but in your own head. What part of this is what operating system, because then you have to go and figure that all out. The rest of this is, I want to say it's not as bad as it looks, in that a lot of this you can just not worry about. Most of, if we take a look at this top one here, add servicing stack update via latest cumulative update. The servicing stack updates are, for the most part, integrated into the latest cumulative update, which means down here, when you're going to add the latest cumulative update, for the most part, you've already done that right here via the servicing stack update. So you don't need to worry about the latest cumulative update. That can go away. If you're not adding new languages or new optional packages, font support, text to speech, features on demand, optional components, all of this can also go away. Don't worry about it. Okay. So really, what you're looking at is the servicing stack update and latest cumulative update. In Windows recovery environment, there's a Safe OS dynamic update, which is essentially their the GUI that they have for, hey, do you want to recover your system? Try rebooting it, do this. The Safe OS. Okay, that's what they call it. Fine. You will want a setup dynamic update if you're doing a full installation media, like a new ISO or a new USB. For me, I don't always need that. If I'm building a new clean Windows install ISO, yes, I need it. But if I'm updating an installation that's only going to be delivered via PXE, I don't need that. I'm not booting a full ISO or a USB stick. I'm just booting Windows PE and then dropping an install.wim into it. So the setup dynamic update, maybe you need it, maybe you don't. Same with adding these particular files and adding a boot manager to the actual media. You might not need any of those steps. If you do, they're the last steps that you need. This latest cumulative update, pardon my garble there, again, don't need it because we have it up here. Clean up the image. If you're going to add .NET and .NET cumulative updates, I'm not going to, not in a clean installation ISO anyway, because that's just more stuff I'm going to have to keep track of. So that's going to go away. And then export the image to slim it down properly. That's your final step. It's not as bad when you can take a huge chunk of it and just say, I'm going to just throw all of these steps right out the window. Out of 28 steps, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 steps that we just got rid of just by doing that. Plus another 2, now it's 14, and we've cut it down by half. And you may not even need these 3. You might be down to 11. You might be down to 9 or 10 steps out of something that looked like a very intimidating 28. Other notes here. The latest cumulative update might have a prerequisite cumulative update. It's not exactly cumulative now, but not fully cumulative. But there you've got checkpoint cumulative updates. What does this look like? Well, when you're getting these, you want to get it from the Microsoft Update Catalog. I did a search for KB 510 1650. And then I did another search later, so that's what that's from. But looking at KB 510 1650, you can see that I've got 4 candidates here. There's X64, that's what I want. I don't need the ARM64. I really don't. But then you're like, okay, what's the remaining difference? This one is for 24H2, this one is for 25H2. But it's the same updates. And when you click on one of them, if you hit download for this, you can see there's actually 2 files. One of these, 504.3080, is the checkpoint cumulative update. So you need to download that. And then you've got 510.1650, which is the newer cumulative update, which goes on top of that. And if, it gives you the SHA-1 values right there so that you can see them. And if you go look at the 24H2 version, you see they're listed in reverse order. but it's the same two files, 504 3080 and then 510 1650. Same SHA-1 values. It's exactly the same regardless of what you're doing. But once you get those, then you're going to need to install them. And fortunately, Microsoft has made this somewhat easier with the checkpoint cumulative updates, because all you need to do to install the checkpoint, call add Windows package with the target cumulative update, the final one. And then it'll look in that folder and say, are there any other checkpoints that are necessary before I add the target one? All I need to do is put both of those updates, the 504 and the 510, into the same folder and then say, install 510. Windows will actually discover that it needs 504, find it, and apply it for me. So that helps as well. And then they do actually supply PowerShell scripts to go through it all. But it looks incredibly complicated and confusing. Just remember that you only need to do particular steps. This setup, this is just a script to do setup and declare a bunch of variables. If you know where everything is being done manually, you don't need to worry about it. For updating Windows Recovery Edition, you're first going to need to load the installation image from install.wim, and then you're going to need to load the image from winre.wim, which is at the same location as you would expect it to be. I'm doing that thing where I just go through a script and read the lines that I want and that I need to, make sure I've got a firm handle on exactly what's going on. And then once it's mounted, you're going to add the servicing stack update via the LCU, the latest cumulative update. And you're just going to add Windows package, give the path to the image itself, and then the package path, and give the target update. It'll do the checkpoint and then the target update, and you're good. If you get an error, apparently there's one error that you can get which is a known issue with a combined cumulative update, and the script just says, yeah, we can ignore this. Okay, great. Well, then if you get that warning, you don't need to worry about it. Wonderful. A language, we're not adding more languages, or at least I'm not adding additional font support. I'm not adding text to speech. I do need to add the Safe OS update, and that's where I can go and say, okay, well, what's the Safe OS dynamic update in update catalog? And I can find that. These are all the August ones. If I was going with the July ones, which is what I was doing when I was going through this, I do note that I essentially had an update on July 14th. I had a July 18th update out of band, which I looked at it and it said, oh, this is a limited number of Dell devices. I'm not doing any Dell devices on this, so I'm not terribly worried about this particular driver on Dell devices. Okay, because it's only recommended for devices affected by this issue. All right, well, I'm not going to worry about it then. And the 28th was a preview build. Not the final one. Okay, well, maybe I don't want to put a preview build into my final installation media, so I'll just stick with the regular Patch Tuesday one. And for Safe OS, you might do the same thing, or you might choose to go with the newest one available, and either one would work, honestly. But again, you've got ARM 64 based. No, that's not what I want. I've got an X64 based 510-2117. Okay, that looks for 24H2. Okay. And I might have one as well for 25H2. There it is. I skipped past it. But it's the same KB number, 2117. It's the same size. I'm going to bet that these are going to be the same thing. x64. This is aab0.cab, rpru equals. And if I check the 24H2 for the same one, yeah, aab0 ending in rpru equals. Okay, so that's the same thing. These are cab files, not MSU files. And your dynamic update script, when you're adding SafeOS, you can just use the same add Windows package, even though it's going to essentially just be extracting files from the cab and overlaying them into your actual Windows recovery environment. But that's fine. It just comes as a different type of file, a cab. All right, cool. Image cleanup. Then this command will do a cleanup of the image, start component cleanup, reset base, defer. Okay. I looked up what all of these arguments were. You probably don't need to. Image tells it where to find the image. Yeah. Clean up the image. Okay. Because and then component cleanup is the same thing. Windows often keeps multiple versions of files in the SXS folders side by side. And the reset base says, okay, we're going to clean these down to just a single image. We started with one, added a bunch of other versions. Now we're going to declare that the current version is our new base version, and we're going to clean all the other stuff up. Defer just means, hey, if there's a whole bunch of long-running background tasks that need to be done, do those later. Don't do those right now during this cycle. Okay, fine. Then it's a simple matter of dismounting it. When you dismount it, the WIM will keep track of old versions of media that were in the WIM. So then you export it to get rid of all of those old versions and have a clean, updated WinRE. Great. There's your first step. Then you're going to move into updating the main OS. Again, only doing what you need to. Add the servicing stack update, the same update that you applied to Windows Recovery Edition, because it's the same KB. All right, so we're going to add that, skip the language stuff, skip features on demand, skip legacy features. We already did the latest cumulative update, skip that too. And then we're just going to go straight into performing image cleanup, not with a reset base, because this is the full installation image and it's probably good to have multiple versions in your installation image, I'm guessing. And .NET, we're not going to worry about that. Then it's going to be a dismount, export, same thing. And we're done with that. Windows PE gets slightly trickier, but this does say that, it's very similar to the one that updates Windows recovery environment. If this is an installation boot.wim, then yes, it typically has two images, and you'll need to update both of them. If you've got a single image in your boot.wim because it's being used for PXE booting or something else that you've customized, then you're only going to do this once. But if it's an installation image, you got to make sure you update both. So, mount the image, add the servicing stack update, okay. Skip the languages, skip the font support, skip the text-to-speech, skip a lang.ini file to define the language packs. Okay. Already did the latest cumulative update. Do the image cleanup. Same options as for Windows recovery environment. And then there's this section, if the image index equals 2. Well, on the first image, you're not going to do any of this. You're just going to dismount the one image and export it. But if this is the second image, which has the actual setup files, you want to save setup.exe and the setup host.exe files out of the sources. And that's useful if you're actually putting this onto installation media like an ISO or a USB stick, because these need to be exactly the same binaries as you have on the media and in the boot.wim. And the script itself just says this will address possible binary mismatch with the version in the main OS sources folder. Okay. Just to make sure that the media is the same exact thing as Windows PE. And then you're going to save your serviced boot manager files for later copy to the new media. And this is the part that started me down this entire process, because I needed these files. And it turned out not only do I need the boot manager firmware EFI file, I also need this boot.stl file. As far as I can tell, boot.stl is an additional file to handle secure version number revocations and other secure boot information. It's a small file. I haven't been able to read it. I haven't really tried, if I'm honest. But it needs to be on your media if you're booting an ISO or USB stick. Not if you're booting via PXE. If you're booting via PXE, it seems to be sufficient that it's in the boot.wim. But if you're booting off of other media, it has to be there. And it has to exactly match the versions that you have there. So then, okay, you can dismount it, export your image, and you'll be moving along. And then updating the remaining media files. There's also a setup dynamic update, which is what you had seen that I had last been searching for when I did this. The setup dynamic update just updates the setup files on the ISO/USB stick. And it's as simple as just unpacking it. You're not even going to use a command to add packages or anything. You're literally just going to extract the contents to the sources directory of your media path. And that's simple enough. And then you're going to manually copy setup and setup host.exe that you extracted from the boot.wim, overwrite whatever you put in for dynamic update to make sure that it's exactly binary the same. And then you're going to copy your boot manager files. This one's a little tricky, but at least when you're reading it, because you're like, if it's boot manager firmware or boot X64 or boot IA32 or boot AA64, you'll typically only have one of these. And for me, it's usually bootx.64 or boot manager firmware in a single directory, but there are multiple copies of it. So example one will be under EFI boot, and one will be under EFI Microsoft boot, and you want to make sure that you copy boot manager firmware.efi into both of those locations with the correct file name, overwriting whatever you had there before. Boot manager.efi also needs to go there, fine. And boot.stl also needs to go there, also fine. One additional little wrinkle there. Okay, you've now got your media new path and you've got precisely where it needs to go. Great, fine. And we're going to skip this last bit about finishing it up and dismounting images and whatnot, because you already probably did that. But then how do you get your files into the new format? Well, if you've done Windows PE work, then you know that there is make winpemedia.cmd that you can just pass it the variable, the switches, the arguments for what you want, USB flash drive or ISO. You give it the working directory that, has /media underneath it. You give it the destination that you want it to go to. And optionally, you can add /bootx, which uses boot files signed with the Windows UEFI CA 2023 certificate. These will typically live in a boot bins directory, which actually is what the script is looking for, boot bins. And those files you also might need to update. Let me show you what I mean. Here's my bootbins directory. There's a regular version and there's an _ex version. Both of these need to be updated according to the version that you are working with for the secure version number. I had these all at secure version number 7. Now they need to be secure version 9. And the same is true for the EFI sys exe and the EFI sys no prompt. I've basically went through the installation image and pulled all of these out so that they're at the newer version number. And now when I use the make WinPE media script, it can actually get the correct versions according to whether I'm doing a 2011 signed or 2023 signed installation media. More and more at this point, August 2026, I'm pushing 2023 as often as I can. But on the off chance that I still need something that doesn't have the updated certificates, I'm giving myself the option of having the 2011 signed media as well, just in case. But both need to be updated, and that's its own special little bit of fun. So, yeah, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, and it looks super intimidating, I realize. And for any non-technical folks who happen to be watching this, I've probably gone through this, multicolored script here, and people are going, huh? What do you mean it only looks complicated? That is complicated. Yeah, I don't blame anybody who feels that this entire process looks and feels super complicated, because it felt super complicated to me too. And if I'm honest, it kind of still does. I looked at this and I went, okay, well, even if I cut it down to only like 12 steps per installation media, I have at least 5 different sets of media that all need to be updated. Some of which are using mismatched install.wim and boot.wim versions, which works. But I need 2 separate sets of update, and I need to keep track in my head of what update I'm applying to what media in what installation path. And then I need to keep track of figuring out, am I doing this for 2011 signed media or 2023 signed media? It is still very complex. It is still complicated. Absolutely. I'm just saying that you can cut out half of the complexity, which, every little bit helps, but it's still absolutely something that you can expect to take some time on. And you'll probably have a few false starts, just like I did. Like I said, I've been working on this all week. All week. And I mean, not just through my workday too, but into the evenings as well, because I'm the kind of guy who just sits there and keeps going through it until I've figured it out and keeps working on it. So did basically a full week of most of the time that I've been awake. I've been working on this. And yeah, but there it is. Hopefully this has given you some insight into the process, maybe let you see that it doesn't have to be as complex as it looks when you're staring at a chart with 28 different steps. And yeah, hopefully that it's something that you guys can figure out working with a little easier than having to go into it blind. If you have thoughts on other things that you would like to hear me talk about, or things that you would like to see me demonstrate, feel free to let me know right down there in the comments section. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. I am your next door netadmin, and we will see you next time.